In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the computer science and digital fluency learning standards. We are going to be going through each of the standards sort of in depth as far as looking at what the standard is asking on a K-12 basis. I highly recommend that you pause this video often to take a look at the standard and the clarifying statement that fit within your grade band that you teach, and also take a peek at the one below and the one above. This is going to be a very quick overview of the standards, so if you aren't familiar with them, I highly recommend you taking some time to familiarize yourself with them, either by taking the courses that are separated into each of the concept areas, or by really reading through these activities and kind of taking a peek at what you think they look like in action. So I'm on the PDF that was listed on the State Ed web page, and I'm just going to show you quickly that navigation. So I'm on, if you look up in the Omni box at the top here, I'm on the NYSED.gov/curriculum instruction /computer science and digital fluency learning standards. And then I clicked on the very first link that's on the web page, the New York State K-12 Computer Science and Digital Fluency Learning Standards, all grades. And it's going to take me out to a really good PDF that's going to help me as I'm going through to look at them. So I'm going to hide the navigation on the right here, make this a little bigger as we go through. So the information you're going to have at the first, obviously there's some introduction that you can read through. And then it also talks a little bit more about the way they've developed the standards, our guiding principles, which are equity and access, interdisciplinary connections, coherence, relevance, and engagement. And then you can see some more information about the standards and how they were put together and what our focus or our lens needed to be as these standards were created. But what I'm going to scroll down to next is, and actually I'm going to come over here so I'm not scrolling away on you, is the first concept area. So the first concept area is impacts of computing. And here we're going to be talking about 4 different areas where these standards kind of lie. So 4 sub-concept areas within impacts of computing. So let's kind of go through this and what we're talking about here. So impacts of computing is thinking about the fact that every time we use anything with technology, there are certain behaviors, there's certain cultural and social interactions. We have to think about equity, the implications, and even the ethics behind the build and the use of these technologies. As we go through the concept areas here, you'll see that we have society, where we're talking about how society has changed with the changes within our technology or our computing, and we know that there are laws that are involved in here as well. Ethics is thinking about the creation and the use of technology, thinking about bias, and thinking about our unintended impacts on society. So this is a big one, as far as talking about how and when it's okay to use technology, how is it being built, and how is it being used. And then there is also accessibility and career paths. Here we're talking about how the technology can either help or hinder the use for others. And we're also talking about career paths where we're thinking of the different areas that our students can think about for pursuing computer science outside of our classrooms. For computational thinking, we are taking a look at 4 different sub-concept areas. With computational thinking, you're really thinking about problem solving. It's not just math, if that's what you're used to thinking with computational thinking, but it's thinking about the parts that make sense or you have to include in order for something to make sense. So that's abstraction. We can definitely abstract in English class where we're pulling apart our essay and making sure we're only using the words that are going to make it easier for the reader to understand versus all the extra parts that maybe aren't needed. We're going to be talking about decomposition, which again, if you're looking at a paragraph that an author wrote, you might break apart or annotate that paragraph when you're thinking about the important parts, or you're thinking about what's the thesis statement or what's the key idea, the main idea, what are the character traits. We're really decomposing or breaking down that paragraph to talk about the things that are important to us in English. You're talking about data analysis. So you have some information and you have to think about and analyze and be able to organize it in a certain way. Modeling and simulations, you're going to be able to showcase that data in different ways, whether it's a graph or a chart or breaking it into paragraphs. We're also looking at how we can come up with solutions. So we make a hypothesis or we make a statement, and we need to persuade, or we need to communicate our thoughts and actions within our writing or with our words. Each of the subconcept areas are going to break down this even further. So modeling and simulation is where we're thinking about how we can represent the data that we have. With data analysis and visualization, it's thinking of the best ways to organize that data and how we can visualize it, and then how can we analyze it. With abstraction and decomposition, we're thinking about decreasing or reducing the complexity of the things that we've created, and decomposition could be breaking it into smaller parts. And then debugging, which, think of debugging like editing. You're going to edit your essay to make it easier for the reader, no different than you're going to debug a line of code to make sure the computer can understand it. With algorithms and programming, here we are looking at a process to be able to have something happen. Think of it as your sequencing, your how-to essays, that you're thinking about how we can get somebody to be able to do something. So if you were going to make a boat in origami, you're going to talk about the different ways to fold and what you're going to pinch and pull and do those kind of things when you're creating. Same thing when you're writing an essay. That's what we're talking about with algorithms. And into programming, when you're actually doing lines of code, it's no different than writing a paragraph. You need to make sure that they're clear and concise, and you need to make sure that there's no bugs in it or no errors that are going to distract from what the line of code or the sentence is trying to convey. The next area is networks and systems design, and this really can be a little bit more difficult to think about how it fits into our ELA classrooms. But here we're talking about our computing systems. What are the parts? What is the hardware? What's the software? We want to make sure that our students understand the tools that we use in order to then transfer those skills to whatever they're going to do outside of our doors. So it's broken into two subconcept areas: hardware and software, and networks and the internet. Hardware and software is talking about the computing systems composed of the hardware, software, and how we use them. Networks and the internet is talking about how data is stored and how it's transferred, and thinking about the fact that we are connected in a global network. The next one we have is cybersecurity, and this is really thinking about every time we touch technology, are we thinking about our risks? Are we putting safeguards in place? And if there's some sort of breach, what's our response? And those are the three subconcept areas that we have within cybersecurity. So what are our risks? What we have in New York State here, we have ELA 2D that's supposed to lessen those risks a bit, because we're talking about having contracts about how data is stored and transferred between a vendor and our students. We're thinking about the safeguards. We're thinking about how we protect that data, so we don't share our passwords, we don't take them to our desks, we don't share passwords with others. We're talking about the precautions we can put in place. Many schools have switched to multi-factor authentication, where you have to use your cell phone or some sort of key to be able to make sure that it is you using the device. And then finally, we're looking at that response. What is the response if a security breach happens? What are we going to do to protect our data, and how are we going to improve our security going forward? Finally, we have digital literacy, and this is broken into two subconcept areas. We have digital use and digital citizenship. Digital use is how we use technology every day. So we create, we revise, we publish, we communicate, we collaborate, all the things that we do with technology. And with digital citizenship, we're really thinking about how we are and how we act in a global society. And we're also thinking about how we can share our beliefs and understand the beliefs of others. So we want to think about creating empathy and think of ourselves as global citizens. So take a moment and go through those a little bit more in depth. The following videos we're going to do is going to talk about each of those concept areas a little bit further.